Welcome to Game Design Analysis. My name's Enuki, and in this video we'll talk about the problems with SMITE Conquest in relation to the new player experience, the returning player experience, and the competitive player experience, which I think means all the player experiences. Not only that, we'll be looking at how the very amazing Titanforge could be producing more content for less manpower hours for increased revenue, which means looking at inefficiencies. We'll get there later, but Titanforge have very talented developers, in particular their environmental art team and gameplay programmers, but much of their time isn't spent deploying content in the most efficient way. Now, this video exclusively talks about the objectives in SMITE Conquest and is separated into a few parts. This video in its entirety is just part 1 as well, so expect another video after this one. But let's start this introduction with a popular misconception. There is this common and constant belief that if you improve the experience for one group of players, then it takes away from another group of players. In this case, catering for casual players versus catering for competitive players. People visualize it like a tug of war. Often, at times, it is the competitive players that are complaining that if you do something that favors the casual player base, then it is the competitive players that suffer the consequences. But it's not a tug of war. Making the game better for casual players does not necessarily mean making it worse for competitive, and vice versa. You can have changes that improve the experience for one without harming the other, or even improving the experiences for both. Instead, it's more like a bar graph. We can improve the new player experience, the casual player experience, returning player experience, veteran experience, competitive player experience, pro experience, and the disabled player experience. All of these different experiences can be improved without detracting from another. That last one is really telling, isn't it? By adding accessibility features which help colorblind players or players that have difficulties with strobing, flashing lights, overstimulation of visual and auditory sensors, which can derive from autism, does that lessen the experience for all the other players? Of course not. Now, let's start the actual conversation. Conquest is SMITE's flagship mode. Well, it's supposed to be, and I think it is the mode with the most potential for fun. The idea of Conquest is that you destroy the enemy's towers, then their phoenix, and you do all that to destroy the enemy titan, at which point you win the game. To do that, though, you are going to need gold and experience to make yourself powerful enough to defeat your enemies. So, what are the problems related to Conquest? More specifically, what are the problems for new players trying to get into Conquest? Let's start there. And if you're a competitive player watching, please wait for the next part before voicing your complaints, because we're gonna make the game better for you too. The first problem is that new players in SMITE are not sure where to go. Hopefully this new system helps them find where to at least start, which was added on the 17th of September 2024. But what about after their start? Players still don't know where to go after that. Let's go back to SMITE 1 to see why this became such a prevalent problem in the first place for players trying to get into Conquest. There's just so many camps and objectives, and they hold so much value. In your average game of Conquest in SMITE 1, the better team is not the team which fights better, but the team that knows how to play the map better, which oddly is a lot of PvE, and that shouldn't be difficult to agree with because, I mean, there's just so much PvE content on the map that has been added since SMITE began in 2012. Now, here's the first form of Conquest, just a few camps here and there. And here's Conquest now, which doesn't even show you everything. There's patrolling harpies, there's these chest camps, there's the pre-fire giant, there's the Stygian beacon, there's the meteors that land in lanes 2. I mean, we'll cover this in a different video, but the success to SMITE 1 is based on a bus scheduling system, creating an optimal route that you move around and collect the camps in a timely manner with your team. The more optimal your bus schedule is compared to the enemies, the more XP and gold you will have. You don't even have to be good at fighting then, because the level and item lead will win the fights for you. Again, more on that in a different video. You have to actively learn to play Conquest. I'm going to provide 3 scenarios now, and I need you to commit them to memory. I'm going to focus on 3 particular and very common problems that's easy to understand where we're going wrong, and should help us find a suitable resolution. The mid-camps, both in SMITE 1 and SMITE 2. Typically, the jungler comes to do the mid-camps early on either side of mid lane, and the mid lane player should go help, not just to share XP, but to ensure they are secured. Later on, the support also becomes responsible for securing those camps as they roam around, allowing the carry to farm solo to get strong, and the jungler to do other things. Commonly though, the mid player or the jungler or the support do not do this on their team, and the other team who does end up doing this gets ahead just from these camps alone. You really don't learn this just by passively playing, hence why so many players still don't do this. Join me on my Twitch channel and watch how often I play jungle and the mid lane doesn't come to my assistance. Now, I don't rage at them because I understand that this is a game design fault. It doesn't make it obvious for them to do, and I also don't have any appreciation for the skill of just going to the mid camp and killing it. I mean, what, am I supposed to be impressed? So, you know, whatever. They don't help me secure the camp that gives us more experience as a team overall, that allows us to then have an advantage. Whatever. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is the Gold Fury or the Fire Giant. This one won't take long to explain. So many games in SMITE 2 already have very little Gold Fury and Fire Giant secures. Players just don't really know how to engage with the objective, and I've experienced 30+ minute games where no Gold Fury is taken at all. And what typically happens is a team wins a fight and then they'll go take one of these objectives, or someone sneaks in a Gold Fury by chance, or one team is doing the Gold Fury and the other team just last hit steals it, then immediately wants to disengage. Though usually it's not a team contesting, it's just one person trying to get that last hit in to steal. There's not really a lot of fighting over these objectives, which is one of their design purposes. They are designed to be a thing that you fight over, but they don't succeed very well in that, at least for your average game of Conquest across all skill levels. The higher up in skill you go, the more likely objectives are to be contested, but the statement still overall holds true. These objectives don't often result in an actual team fight, which is exciting. We want to do team fights. That's the exciting part. And I believe what happens is that we so often look at high-level matches and say, see, it is working as intended, exactly like we designed, and then write off lower-level matches as it's because they don't know how to play. But we shouldn't be focusing on whether or not they can play the game, we should be focusing on whether the experience is delivering enjoyment, and since this objective isn't delivering those team fights we envision it does, we should probably re-evaluate them. So the last scenario is when two teams end up in a stalemate. You know those really long games that go beyond 40 minutes? Sometimes those games can be really one-sided, and the team that is massively ahead still can't close the game out. Like in this match here, it's 40-10, and the enemy team don't know how to end it, but it's not their fault. There's a logical game design flaw here, and we're about to resolve that flaw. Remember these 3 scenarios as we now advance. We're going to redesign SMITE 2's Conquest to help new players, fixing those 3 scenarios we've mentioned that will also benefit all other groups of players. First of all, we're going to have multiple different Conquest maps, a pool of conquest maps, but each conquest map will have one unique objective that is a focal point. So let's design our first conquest map. Let's get rid of all these jungle camps. We'll put some back in later, but for now, gone. We'll have 3 lanes to keep things standard. Now, the big thing is, every 3 minutes, an objective will spawn. A call to action. Something that gives players a sense of urgency and to be there. And for this map, I'm going to say we stick a big dragon that flies in and spawns in the middle of the map. Right in mid lane. How's that for a call to action? Imagine being in your lane and this dragon flies overhead, you catch its shadow, you look up, you see it go and land in mid lane with a huge puff of smoke for landing, and you know, it's time to duel! The objective is your team has to deal the most damage to the dragon. The more damage you do to the dragon, the more favor you earn with the dragon. Once the dragon has lost all its health, you've not killed it, but the team that did the most damage gets a reward. The dragon lifts off the ground, then it does a massive flame attack on the tower in mid lane. The damage it does to the tower can be related to the difference in damage the 2 teams did. If you only did 1 damage more than your enemy team, you only do a little damage to the tower. If you did a ton more damage, then it might even just collapse the tower from full health. Then, 3 or 5 minutes later, after the dragon has fallen, the dragon will spawn again in the middle of another lane. Now there's benefits for competitive players, which we'll get to later, but for new players, this is a call to action that guides them. Most importantly, it guides them to fun. Where is the fun? It's probably at that dragon. Not only that, the whole spectacle of a giant dragon and winning that objective will look super cool. You want to win that objective just because of that. It's also going to look like a really cool GIF somewhere that someone will post, so marketing, hooray! But do you remember scenario 1 and 2? Players don't know how to do those mid camps. Players don't know when to do Gold Fury and Fire Giant, big objectives. Part of the problem is that they aren't that interesting as a spectacle point of view. They don't have enough appeal to pull players out of Arena and into the Conquest experience, because what is the Conquest experience? If you add the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant and then some lanes to Arena, you have Conquest. But the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant ain't that much of a spectacle to be interesting, so it's obvious why players are happy being in Arena, and that's great. Arena is a fantastic experience for those players, but if we want to get players into Conquest, what can Conquest bring? As for scenario 3, where you have a stalemate and that feeling of a game just not ending when it really should have like 10, 20 minutes ago, because winning the objective leads to guaranteed tower damage, the constant taking of this objective is going to lead towards the end of the game, to that resolution in a timely fashion. I want to play with my team, but unless my team knows how to play, they aren't going to join up with me on those mid-camps or Gold Fury in the current Conquest iteration. In this new system, however, even the newest of players is going to be directed to a meaningful objective and join in on the fun, which means I get to play with them. I get to share in their success and fails. That is important for getting players to come back into Conquest and not feel so isolated, because at the moment there are many roles in SMITE Conquest that will have you feeling isolated. Now let's add some of the jungle back in, but not much. These jungle camps should also work not towards empowering the players and making them stronger, but to contributing mainly towards the destruction of enemy towers, phoenixes, and that titan. Now this map is going to be an Arthurian map. Since it has a dragon, sounds cool. I'm going to add this camp here. It's a siege factory, and taking this camp will secure 6 minions that spawn out of the door with a battering ram. They will then charge down the nearest lane, which is this one, and they will just go to a tower. And they will deal a good amount of damage if they get to that tower, unless the enemy team destroys it. And it's quite hard to destroy, like you need to get some good single target damage down on that. Now, this camp works better than standard buff camps for a few reasons. Why does mid lane not help me as a jungler to secure the mid camps? Because what interest is there in these camps? What do you get for these camps? Golden XP? I mean, it's not that spectacular. It's not making me want to go do it for any cool reason other than I just get stronger, but that's just numbers getting bigger. However, in this version, where you get a battering ram when you take a camp, there's instant and meaningful impact when you take that camp. You can see what it does immediately. You know what it's going to do, and it helps you end the game by taking those critical structural objectives. The buff camps in Smite 1 and 2 make you stronger, but my observations is most players really don't draw as much of a connection to the camps, which means they don't engage with the camps as much as the design intentions are. And that's of the players who actually play Conquest. We're trying to think about the players who don't play Conquest, as well as new players. There are areas for improvement, and I know some people would say, Anuki, you're wrong. People always engage with the camps in my games. And I've had that conversation many times. And there's a pattern. Those players are always high-ranking Smite competitive scene players. They are kind of in their own bubble and not aware of the players who don't play Conquest and the reasons why they don't play Conquest. Take Smite 1, the blue buff. The solo player takes it at the start to sustain themselves in lane, and it sucks if you don't get it or you lose it early. It's not that you want the blue buff, it's not a desirable buff, it's just that you need it. It's an unhealthy addiction. An unhealthy relationship is a better way to describe it. In contrast to Heroes of the Storm though, I may lose a camp, but since that camp isn't making me directly more powerful, it doesn't feel as bad. Camps serve a function for the team, not for any individual. And that's some interesting psychology to think about, and that's probably why many players in Heroes of the Storm do actively engage with the camps. I notice a lot in Smite 1 and 2 that when people invade, there are a lot of players who don't rush to defend their camps, and I think this is partially why. If you lose the blue buff on your team, I know 4 people who won't give a damn. If you lose the purple buff for your duo lane, I know 3 people who won't give a damn. Sure, the duo lane will cry, but it's not directly affecting the other 3 players on the team, so who the heck cares? It will, however, indirectly affect them later on, but that's hard to process since you won't feel the effects of losing that camp immediately. You do, however, feel the effects of a camp bashing down your gates, and as such, players have a stronger connection to the effects of that camp in a more immediate fashion. As such, camps become a bigger factor for consideration among the general player base. But compared to getting a battering ram down that lane, there's no instant feedback as to what a buff does, and there's also no variety. Let's say taking this siege camp before 10 minutes gets you a battering ram. But between 10 and 20 minutes, it's a catapult. And then after 30 minutes, it's a trebuchet. We're making these camps more appealing, more interesting. And by the way, this is all map specific. A different themed map, like a Chinese map, could have this nifty little rocket artillery as the late game siege machine. Let me know in the comments what other units would be really cool to bring under your banner and see charge down the lane. There's so much mythology to tap into here. We can create a few more camps like this. Taking this camp, we'll recruit a set of special crossbow soldiers to charge down the lane. Taking this magic camp, we'll send a special priest healer who heals nearby gods. You might ask, what happens to the jungle role in Smite? Well, the jungle role has always been mainly an assassin. Someone that roams and tries to gank. Doesn't necessarily have to be from the assassin class, but that's how they play. They want to gank. And since they don't need to farm XP from the jungle anymore, which, by the way, there's a lot of obscurity as to who owns the jungle, because as support you take the jungle, the carry takes from the jungle, solo takes from the jungle, mid takes from the jungle. Is the jungler really a jungler at this point? No, they're really are more just of an assassin or roamer. They are the ones that should focus on freely moving between the lanes and ganking, which is the fun thing to focus on doing, as opposed to just taking camps, or in some cases crying because there are no camps up and you just have to leech XP from lane, which is fairly common in SMITE 2 at the moment. Anyway, you see how by game design we're secretly encouraging players to engage with engagements and direct them to where fun can be achieved. Actually, this brings me to an important point. In SMITE 1 and 2, you are often punished for doing the fun thing and rewarded for doing the less fun thing.
Stygian Beacon is up. But I want to be with the Stygian Beacon, but if I do that, I go lose out on XP, so what do?
The Stygian Beacon is a great example here in SMITE 1. As a carry, I want to go over to the Stygian Beacon and fight over that. But if I go do that, I lose considerable farm. In fact, if you have a team that is always fighting and you show up to those fights all the time, you'll find yourself behind those who just stayed and farmed. But let's say you did, as a carry, go to the Stygian Beacon. It might have been a waste of time because there's no guarantee that the enemy will go for that objective, which means you showed up for no reason at all and lost farm. The Stygian Beacon is a fairly meaningless objective to what we are suggesting in this redesign though, by comparison, but hopefully you see what I'm saying. In SMITE, you are punished for trying to go do the fun thing in Conquest. You went to that team fight instead of farming like a good little farmer, and for that, you might be punished for it. And that's sometimes even if you win that fight. Fights don't last long, not normally, and when they do last, I mean, they're pretty exciting. So spending 20 seconds running to where that fight is to get 2 seconds of action. Look, even if you win that fight, it's not hugely rewarding. It makes sense as to why players would rather spend their time in arena and cut out all that running time and respawning time and actually just get into what they enjoy about SMITE. It's not like teams are fighting over objectives here like we've established. This Conquest design is so disharmonious. Nothing meshes with each other. Disharmony really is a key word here. The lethality is high, players die fast, and yet the map is so big that when a fight breaks out, it's unlikely players will arrive in time to join that fight and make a difference. Camps die so quickly that you can't contest them, despite that being one of their purposes and functions. And the way that you secure camps doesn't lead to fights over them. Most players just tap the camp and run away because they don't want to fight because their abilities will be on cooldown after securing the camp. Even from a monetary point of view, we're not making as much money as we could. We could travel that big map if we had a mount, and we could then sell mounts, but let's not get into that discussion. Feels like we don't need this level of complexity in this video to talk about the ins and outs of adding a mount system. We already have so much to tackle. There's more to say about this change of direction, but if your first thought is, this doesn't work, it won't work, don't worry. It does. All we need to think about right now is whether or not this sounds interesting. Fight a massive dragon, earn its favor, recruit soldiers to go down lanes and focus more on fighting the enemy team than out-farming that enemy team. And maybe some of you are quite savvy in the MoBA world, but this is similar to how Heroes of the Storm is. Now before you say Heroes of the Storm failed, I'd like to point out that Heroes of the Storm stopped development almost 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. You can queue up for this game today, no problem. How many games could do that? If a free-to-play game you know stopped updating, do you think it would be alive in 4 to 5 years' time? Heroes of the Storm failed not because it was a bad game, but rather some very bad management choices, which is a video for another time. We've got a lot to deep dive into there, and we've got some real juicy stuff. But look at this. Before I even load up into a match of Heroes of the Storm, you are equipped with everything you need to know, not to play the game, but to have fun in the game. Check this map out. Hanamura Temple. At regular intervals, a payload spawns at the center of the battleground that can be contested by both teams. All you have to do is escort the payload, and when you do that to completion, it'll bomb the enemy. That's all you need to know. The rest is just passive learning how to play your character, fight as part of a team, and fight the enemy, which you just do by playing the game. How about this one? Infernal Shrines. Slay 40 Guardians before the enemy team does, and bring forth a Mighty Punisher. I mean, literally out of the 3 things at the bottom, there's only 2 things that the player needs to do. One of them is pretty damn obvious, and the other is slay 40 things. The third thing is just what happens when you do those 2 other things. Then you've got camps around the map, and taking those will do things that you immediately understand once you've completed those camps, which again, you're just passively learning. In SMITE, taking those mid-camps is golden XP, but you don't... It's hard to quantify how that is really helping you out, and, you know, it's not really saying, hey, look, kill me, I'm a really cool thing to kill, because you get golden XP from just killing minions anyway. It's... What's the pull factor? Now, if I load into this map, I could start in the wrong place. I shouldn't be bot lane as a healer. This is not optimal. This is not correct. But guess what? It isn't game over. And that is critical. And at 3 minutes in, an objective will spawn, and then I'll be in the right spot. In SMITE 1 and SMITE 2, however, if the player starts in the wrong place, your heart sinks. This match is a waste of time. One player has ruined the game for 4 other players on their team, and they didn't even mean it. It's just that they don't know, and unless you like free wins, the other 5 opponents don't get a satisfying, worthwhile match either. We can avoid this. Now, I did mention different Conquest maps. We'll come back to this later, but very quickly. That's the Arthurian map with the dragon. We could then make a second Conquest map. This one is instead a simple King of the Hill, hold the zone for long enough with no enemies inside. Basically the Stygian beacon amplified, real basic stuff. This could be a Chinese themed map. Maybe this is only 2 lanes instead. Maybe there is also a boss camp to the side of the map, a giant tiger, and if you defeat this camp, the tiger joins your ranks and charges down the lane until it's defeated. That's much more interesting than getting some gold or a buff from the Gold Fury and Fire Giant. It becomes more desirable to engage with as an objective, and because that tiger directly deals damage to structures and doesn't focus on enemy gods, taking it contributes to eventually ending the game in a timely manner. Unlike when you currently take the Fire Giant and then your team doesn't do any damage to structures because it falls upon the players actually knowing how to take advantage of those buffs, which so many average level players don't. And that's assuming they even get a hold of these tools which are designed to end the game. We could have a map where you have to slay the most enemies in the famous Colosseum in the center of the map. Then there's just 2 lanes flanking this Colosseum. Every 3 to 4 minutes, the Colosseum spawns a random assortment of mythological creatures, and just regular minions too, with swords and shields and bows. But everyone you vanquish appears in a camp at your base, and will eventually charge down a lane and attack everything in its path. You don't have to slay all the combatants of the Colosseum, but you have a time limit. So the question is, does your team go for that rare Griffin that deals a lot of structure damage but is hard to take down? It might require multiple of you to do so, but doing that might invite the enemy to stab you in the back. Or do you try to zone the enemy away and farm light minions until the objective comes to an end? Think of the strategical approaches you could have. Think of the god choices and how they will matter on the different maps. I think we've covered enough ground here, so let's wrap up with one last topic in part 1. Returning players. In SMITE 1, the Conquest map has changed so much over time, and something I encountered, and I'm not alone in my experience, is that when you took a break and returned to Conquest, depending on the length of time you had been gone for, it was just so different. You had to actively learn Conquest again. Where do I start? Where do I go? What items do I build? What's good now? What's bad now? With this new proposed objective system, like fighting that big dragon boss, returning to Conquest becomes not just easier, but more exciting. What new maps are there? What new objectives and bosses and minions and creeps? We want to be thinking about SMITE in 5 years' time, not just now. Will SMITE 1 be one Conquest map that has changed, but is still roughly the same experience, it's just that you don't really know what you're doing now? Or after being away for 1 or 2 years, you return to discover not just the new gods to play, but all of the other content too? Okay, I'm going to do a quick recap of a lot of the talking points that we've done here. I found, whilst designing things, it's really helpful to come to a conclusion. It's basically just a list of saying, this is designed because, and for what reason. So, the new singular major objective system is designed so that new players are guided on where they can go to both have an impact and find some fun to do in the form of a battle, usually. A new singular major objective system is designed so that players can spend more time fighting each other, as opposed to the current system where you don't spend as much time in a 5v5 at all, and in some matches, a 5v5 doesn't even happen. This also makes it better for players who play in groups of 3 or more, as they actually get to group up with each other on objectives, and this better allows for players to bring their friends into Conquest by allowing them to directly assist their allies more frequently. This also helps with the feeling of isolation, which also creates anxiety. Solo, jungle, mid, they can all feel like isolated experiences, and this deters players from joining Conquest and instead makes them favor modes where you are grouped up more often, such as Arena and Assault. The new singular major objective system is designed to take advantage of Titan Forge's skilled art department, creating new maps that add to the SMITE experience, rather than constantly changing Conquest to keep things fresh. With each map having its own theme, it also caters to the audience who really enjoys the mythological side of SMITE, and they will enjoy the variety of stuff that SMITE will have to offer as they go around the map and see all these things that we can create, and I don't know, Titan Forge is very good at that. This also helps reduce Conquest bloat, similar to SMITE 1, where the mode has been... it's been bloated. It's seen huge amounts of additional camps and objectives and all stuff that's just popped around and popped up and then been taken out and replaced. The mode doesn't need all this stuff, I think, and it really does deter both new players and returning players who just they want to come back like after a year or two of playing the game, sometimes just months, sometimes it can just literally be one patch and everything has changed, and it's too much. We can avoid that. The new singular major objective system is designed to allow for more creative strategical approaches by having a variety of different objectives. Now, this is something more for the competitive side of things, which we're going to touch upon in part 2 of this video series, but I thought I'd just put it here, but we'll skip ahead. The new camps are designed to be better lead games to a conclusion, particularly in instances where one side is absolutely dominating, rather than just like padding a game out for an extra 20 minutes because they're kill farming you and they have no idea how to end the game. The new camps are also designed to lead games to a conclusion more intuitively, avoiding situations where teams struggle to end the match, which is currently an issue with the Gold Fury and Fire Giant. The new camps are designed to have a greater interest as opposed to bolstering player stats. This encourages players to interact with the camps rather than ignore them. The new camp system is designed to alleviate the mental stresses associated with invades and losing your camp, instead making it clearly a team responsibility. The new camp system is designed to create less obfuscation with regards to who the jungle belongs to. The jungle belongs to the jungler, and it's their source of XP, we know that, but hang on a minute, yet everyone is supposed to do the jungle as well, and you have to do it in an efficient manner. This is hard for new players, and yeah. Instead, all the camps are just team objectives. Easy. And lastly, the new camp system is designed to better create points of contestation, creating a secondary point of conflict after the main objective or whilst the main objective is not currently up. This is achieved by making camps take longer to clear, requiring multiple players, and having to stand on the zone to capture it, which we didn't kind of mention, but I think it was hopefully inferred. That's a good change to do. Thanks for listening to part 1. There's a lot of details missed here, which works better as part of a discussion, but I can't cover every crevice though. There's part 2 to talk about, and in part 2 we're going to talk about how this system works better for competitive players, even though so far it might really sound like it is casualizing the game. I hope you'll join me, and if you'd like to chat about it, we can do so on Twitch. I love talking about this stuff. I try to stream every day, but if I'm not around, you can certainly find me on Discord and slap me a message. I wish everyone the best, and that includes SMITE 2 as well. I really want this to be the most awesome third-person MoBA game out there, and with Deadlock on its way, I think we can beat them, honestly. But we've got to stop being so traditional and begin innovating the genre, transforming it so it is better for every type of player, not just trying to make the game better for a select few. And we can totally do that. It is accomplishable. Okay then, I'll see everyone around for the next part. My name's Anuki. Have fun. Oh, we've got some giveaways. Come along to the discord.me/Toki to find out how you could win battle passes, skin codes, and more. If you're new to SMITE or want a trusty battle companion, come along to twitch.tv/AnukiTV to find me and Vivi.
We'd love to meet you.
Yeah, we'll help you out, no problem. Also, check out the official SMITE game Twitch and Discord for tournaments, events, and news. What else are we missing?
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Oh yeah, I think that's everything. See you next time.